pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America
and to
to
the
the
republic
republic
for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We can start down there, go around, just say your name so the transcriber can relate the name to the voice.
Rose Larkin.
Mary Rose Spalletta, Marine Resources Task Force.
Wendy Gaetano, Marine Resource Task Force.
Charles.
Nickel, Public Safety Committee.
Jennifer Rusk, Murph.
Johnson, Marine Resource Task Force.
John Goggin, Public Safety Committee. And on the phone is Dawn Thomas from the Public Safety Committee.
I'm here.
So at this point, what we're going to do is turn it over to the consultants to go through their options and recommendations. We'll hold our questions till you finish.
And we are Ed Kramer, Hancock. And on the line we have Rick Kaufman, Suzanne Lansford. Okay, yes, ma'am. That's right. I'm kind of blocking the mic. Okay, so that's no problem. I can talk loud. Well, thank you all for coming here. Thank you for your time and effort that it takes to read and review the materials that we submit. We appreciate it very much. It leads to a better quality outcome. So all we want to do today, what I want to start with is I just have a few slides to help guide us to review the report that you have seen. We're going to do that. Katie, are you seeing the presentation on the Zoom?
I see your next.
That's good.
Click the three dots right below you. Button on the right.
Work?
All right. I can see just.
Okay, so the report, this is just the sections of the report that we're going to go through briefly. We're all familiar with the project scope on Estero Boulevard. This presentation is about Estero Boulevard only. It's not really about the side streets. It's about the design for Estero. So when we went and prepared some cost estimates, we took a look at the many different cross-sections of the different segments of Estero Boulevard, took a look at the best case and the worst case, that being like the most narrow and the widest ones, and came up with, in our calculations, a middle worst case is the basis for our cost estimates.
I'm gonna say one thing behind you.
Yes?
For the group to be able to see it, I can see both.
You know, I'm just going to go with that because
Okay.
I don't want to take time but thank you. You can see my next slide. We wanted to take a look to review the different kinds of luminaires that we looked at so that you could see what we looked at. And the first, of course, is what is out there right now. This is not a recommendation, of course. We just want to present what is out there. It is not FWC certified, of course. It's just regular existing high-pressure sodium FPL program lighting. As such, it is approved by FPL. And if we just left it out there, that's one thing that could be done. And there's a cost associated with that, which we're doing. Another option is that's available through FPL is to just switch out the luminaires that are out there right now with a better efficiency luminaire. Our costs would go down because the monthly cost through FPL is less than what's out there right now. However, it would have the same problems as with regards to the wildlife concerns as the existing system does right now, and that is we have white light, we'd have a bunch of shielding issues, and we'd have to have lights out during part of the year. FPL program lighting offers some wildlife certified amber LEDs. That is an option. Either a town-owned system or an FPL system, and the relative costs are provided. One of the things there are some that are FPL certified and some that are not. If it's not FPL certified, it is not a deal breaker. There is a process by which a lighting can become certified, and that involves some testing at FPL. There is an option for a dual source, amber and white. This is the option where during the turtle nesting season, the amber is illuminated to protect the wildlife, and during the non-nesting season, we have the advantage of the broad spectrum white light, which is better for visibility of pedestrians, road users, and dogs, and anybody who uses the road at night. We're asked to take a look at this really interesting project down in Sarasota. It is a standalone solar system, meaning it is not connected to a utility backup. It is battery operated, battery powered. And we didn't run an analysis of this because with the time we had, we didn't have enough engineering data available. So our cost here is based on an extrapolation of distance of roadway from the literature that we were provided. For example, the Sarasota project was 1 mile, for example, and so ours is 6 miles. We just multiply by 6 and say this is what the cost would be. A little bit about ownership and controls. You could have a FPL utility system or a town-owned system. Also, there is a third option. Does the ESCO option have ownership associated with the ESCO?
The town would still own.
The town would still own it, okay.
Right. It's just, really ESCOs are about financing,
Right.
pay up front for pay over time.
Right.
Which just gives some monetary leverage or latitude.
Right, I just want to put that under ownership. Under FPL utility programs, the FPL option would be controlled by the FPL network, just simple on-off. There would be no accommodation of any dimming or any kind of accommodative lighting control. They just have on-off period. And their network recognizes problems pretty quickly, but response times are not guaranteed. In the town-owned system, the costs are borne up front for construction unless the ESCO option is selected, in which case the cost can be amortized over time, similar to the FPL program. It provides pretty robust controls, more than simple on-off. If we wanted dimming, we wanted to reduce light levels, it gives the town better control over its operations and maintenance, allow for a guaranteed response time.
Something else in town-owned. This is a very nascent technology, the controls, but it's a good path. It's a foundation to start off with. A lot of municipalities are learning how to monetize this. So, hotspotter technology, 5G technology, these things, they need places to park. They need things to attach to. So when you look at a streetlight now, you can look at that as a mounting point for these other technologies, as a backhaul point for communications. If you want to be able to do amber alerts, if you want to be able to tell people about the street fair, you can have electronic signboards. There's a wealth of things that can be done in a town-owned system. The drawback is you have to pay for that base technology to get in. When you want to talk about down the road, being able to do controls, being able to, somebody goes into, say, Times Square, and they attach to your Wi-Fi, and on that Wi-Fi, they get advertisements of what's for sale or what road is closed or where to park. There's an enormous amount of benefit to being able to do a system where the controls are on your side.
And next section of the report is about the timing considerations. If timing is important, the option that we select has some parameters associated with it. For example, FPL utility program systems can be implemented pretty quickly unless the light is not currently on the approved product list, in which case there are a few months that would be required to get that light approved by FPL and the risk of it not passing.
And if it has to have FWC approval, so when we look at the ambers, if something's already on the FWC list and on the FPL list, it's great. If it's on neither list, FPL will not look at an amber fixture until FWC has put it on their list. It's not concurrent pass, these are sequential.
And it's similar for town-owned systems. If it takes 6 months for us to design a system, and we also want certification from FPL or from FWC that doesn't exist, that would be an extra few months to obtain that. The word about ESCOs, I don't think we're going to get into finance options today, but just so that we know when we're making decisions that there's an option to, in a non-FPL program, to amortize costs over time through an engineering service company, which ESCO stands for.
Those can also not only be just a, can also include.
Could you say that again, loud?
Yes,
Thank you.
an ESCO is not just exclusively a finance option. It could also be a maintenance option where the town could contract with the ESCO to maintain the system for the life of the contract.
And then a word about where these cost estimates came from. For the town-owned systems, I used the FDOT item average unit cost from 2020. FDOT costs are standard finishes, and so if there's any desire for anything fancy or decorative, that would increase the cost over what we've shown. FPL costs are based on the tariff that is in place now for the lights that are in place now, and the tariff that goes to the lights that proposed. Joe, I think we just talked with FPL and got their best assessment as to what tariff that would fall under, right? And the other estimated FPL costs, like there's some large costs in here under the FPL program that might have surprised some of you who are thinking that there are no upfront costs to FPL, but it's hard to negotiate with FPL without having an actual project moving forward. So we took a best estimate as to what it would take to do a criteria compliant design with the system that we know as it looks right now. So we need to add some poles in the line, or if we need to add an extra light pole, those would be some extra cost up front.
Typically, when you do street lighting in most places, you've got the distribution line on one side of the road, and you'll go to lighting on the other side of the road. Nice tall poles, nice long arms, reach across. One of the constraints we have here is we do not want the lighting facing the water. And the FPL pole line is predominantly already on the water side of the road. If we want to use that pole line, not a problem that reduces the rental cost on the poles, except for where you want to add a pole. Since it's in the distribution line, FPL would want to install a distribution pole. FPL has already hardened that line, and those big concrete poles are very, very expensive. If we were to want to put an intermediate pole in the distribution line, FPL would want it to be a matching pole. And they might not want to add a matching concrete pole. That is solely at Florida Power and Light's discretion whether to add an intermediate pole. If we have a section where FPL is on the non-water side, and we want to put in some streetlight only poles, there's a few places like that. And in those, there'll be no installation charge as long as it's within close reach of another, with a secondary source, and you just pay the monthly rate for the pole. Water, non-water side complicates things here, and the hardened pole line complicates things here.
A word about our carbon considerations. We thought it was important to do a rough calculation of the carbon load for each of the options. And it was based on the 7.09 times 10 to the minus fourth metric tons of CO2 per kilowatt hour. My superscripts and subscripts didn't come through on here. And we did not include, which is important, but we just didn't calculate at this stage, the contributions from the equipment manufacturer and the installation methods. This is going to be hard to see, but you have the report in front of you. And our recommendation, okay, at the first and second stakeholder meetings, we wanted to investigate the feasibility of the dual source white and amber luminaire, color switchable by the control network according to the turtle nesting calendar. And we wanted to take a look as to whether or not that was feasible. We think it is, and so that remains our recommendation, is to have the dual source amber white LED depending on the turtle season. And whether it's town-owned or FPL-owned or ESCO maintained, it's the resources. And that is our review of the report.
Well, that was briefer than I thought after spending the weekend reading this.
Oh.
But what we agreed is that the chairs would first go through and ask questions based on Steve and my review and our meetings with our committee. So Steve, I'll let you go and ask your questions, and then I'll follow up with mine.
Mine might be a little longer. Do you want to start?
No, go ahead. Doesn't
Okay,
matter. We're
good.
going to be here one way or the other.
Okay, good. Oh, appreciate the document. It was quite interesting, I have to admit. I will say that in general, I couldn't really disagree with the narrative that runs through it, and the fact that it's very much anti-amber, which has been, I think, the sort of the policy along the entire way. It certainly doesn't match any of the MRF recommendations that we had provided to you and to the town council. I do have some questions, and some of the reasons we say, I think we would on the Marine Resource Task Force feel that way is that you're doubling down and tripling down that white light is turtle friendly. And I mean, you have it actually, surprise Suzanne, but it's actually in the report. Contrary to popular belief, it's possible to design road sign in sensitive areas using white LED.
Absolutely is.
Well, I mean, if I can, I have some quotes here from an email that went to our council on November 2019 from Robin Trindell, Dr. Trindell, who was on one of your stakeholder meetings. And I do quote, white LED lights are not turtle friendly, even if they're shielded and full cutoff. There's a potential that these lights are very likely to impact nesting and hatchling marine turtles on the city's beach. And of course, she's the administrator for the FWC's Marine Turtle Management Program. Not only that, but on our stakeholder meeting, she's quoted as saying, "I was surprised that the discussion focused so much on white light because my understanding of the current standards of the state regulatory and local government are going to use when looking at lights in these locations are you do not have to meet the wildlife sensitive requirements for long wavelength." So who do we believe? Do we believe that?
We never said that white light is turtle friendly. Never used that term. Just to be clear, we're not talking, our recommendation is to use amber light. Definitely, I'm not anti-amber. I'm the one that brought the amber LED. That was my design. No Florida Power and Light light that's amber I worked with Robin to get that.
Of course, yeah, at,
Right.
Brighton Beach. and
Definitely not
Kankakee.
anti-amber. That's, what Suzanne is saying is correct. LED is very aimable. One of the big benefits of LED, skipping away from just the turtles for a moment, is light trespass has been an issue for a number of years in a lot of communities. And at FPL, we struggled with a light trespass because HID, the sodium, it's a light bomb. Right? It's just an explosion of light. The LEDs, you can we have run a property line within a couple of feet. You can really tailor where that light is going. You can aim it, you can work with the manufacturer. Never used to have a square light pattern. You can get LEDs now in square patterns. So you can very much put the LED where you want it, and a lot more shielding options with it. In its infancy, when they were brand new, and they were 6,000 K, and they hadn't really gotten the optics right, there were some mistakes out of the gate. But that's 10 years now, and you can really put light where you want to put it. But a recommendation is still amber during turtle season.
What type of amber is that? I mean, I have to
Depends on
tell you,
the-
is this PC amber? I
No,
mean, based
it is
on the-
not, no.
On this table, your dual light, it specifically says that the 1650 lumen amber is driven by 185 watts. I mean, that's white, and the 17,000 white light is driven by 150 watts. I mean, that's the same efficiency. And what you're suggesting on it, amber, this is a narrow band amber light that you're
Okay, so,
suggesting.
yeah,
Can you
I'm getting a lot, sorry, but if we could do one question at a time, it'd be a lot easier.
Okay.
Phosphorus corrected LEDs are not on the table.
Okay, good.
FWC will not approve them.
Absolutely not,
We're
right.
talking narrow band, and we softened some of the words because I don't really want to have to get lost in this manufacturer is 560, and this is 565, and this is 590, and
That's fine.
612.
560 to 590 is fine, right? Anything-
Well, actually, there's a 612 out there.
Okay.
The first crees we did, the ones we did in Bradenton Beach
But
and
those are
Turtle
hor-
Beach,
Those are
were
horrible. Those are red, yeah.
they were horrible. They were 612s.
Right.
Kind of had to, we had to start way over here with FWC. And we really, really wanted to pass that test. And we said, all right, let's be as conservative as possible. We kind of moved our way in, but anything we're talking about is going to be narrow band.
So again, on the table here, then you have to explain where that efficiency comes from.
That came from the manufacturer. But Ed's been working with them. That's what they've given us as preliminary. Those fixtures have not been built yet. We're still waiting for the demos.
That's 3 times the efficiency of anything on the market for amber LEDs.
I could address some of that. I'm an electrical engineer, and I've designed a number of different luminaires fixtures. The LED technology has evolved quite dramatically over the last 10 years. The original amber, and I use that term generically because that just helps to say turtle-friendly type of lighting, evolved, was a very inefficient, relatively, efficient is not the right term, a low lumen output per watt input power. A lot of the thoughts or understandings that the public has based upon that, the low output amber LEDs. Today, other manufacturers beside Cree are offering chips that are in that 560 to 590 range that have much higher output, higher lumen output. It's not quite as high as white light, yet it gets closer to white light output. White light started 10, 15 years ago, and it was 30 to 40 lumens per watt. And the drive over time was to take white light up to where it is today, which is 125, 140, 160 lumens per watt. The high wattage white light. And not as much research and development had been done with the wildlife friendly LED fixed, some manufacturers have developed other chips, and it becomes a real complex formula between lens on each LED, because the light would just go all over. Lensing gives us control to put the light where we want it, and drive current relates to power input, and it also relates to the temperature, function point temperature of the LED. It becomes a rather complex formula as to how to put this together. Old luminaire design with mercury vapor was a big blob of light. We converted that to high pressure sodium, which was a yellow blob of light. Put it where area where we wanted it. But the LED technology has now evolved or grown to a point where we have much greater skill. Several manufacturers now today offer dual LED systems, their product offering line. We're talking to several of those, and come to the information that it is a viable solution based upon the fact that we're trying to achieve lighting levels based upon the design criteria for safety and illumination conformity on the roadway. So we're trying to design to a lighting level, both with friendly lighting and the white light, that becomes fairly similar. So we have uniformity and lighting levels that ensures a higher degree of visibility for pedestrians, bicyclists.
Going back, the original LEDs were red. GE manufactured them for NASA in the 1960s. As a side note, GE decided that LED wasn't going to go anywhere and released a patent into, right.
Yeah.
Along the lines, later on, for the lighting we're looking at now, without getting too deep, depending on the base material that you use, the distance between the electrons, is the color of the light. So they went to these ones that create blue light. And as Ed said, very, very inefficient. They use phosphorus to bring it down. But there are other base materials that come out at other colors. You don't have to start with blue and bring it all the way down to red. There are other base materials.
It was confusing to me because earlier on the advisory, stakeholder roll-up, you had shown the E-luminaire amber, and that's the same 16,500 lumens, but it's a 470 watt power. How you're going from 470 to 185? I mean, typically the driver, you can only drive it at what, 530 milliamps
No, sir.
amber?
No,
doesn't
sir.
it heat up?
No, sir. The drivers, you can buy drivers that run anywhere from a quarter amp up to 3 amps. It's how the driver is built. Stadium lighting drivers are bigger and different, but every driver, it has an optimal current that it's built to, and you want to work within its optimal current. They don't always have to be a half amp or 3/4 amp.
To answer your question, though, specifically, luminaires submitted a fixture that is FWC approved.
Correct.
And that was all friendly or amber LEDs. It was using a lower efficiency LED, that luminaire that was submitted and approved.
Right.
Since that time, they have gone to a different LED configuration and have submitted to FWC a revised submittal because of past year, the events of the past year and a half. FWC is not approving or reviewing any of these things. So the old submittal is still there, and it's still approved, and they can still build to that older technology. There's a newer technology that is being adopted by more than one manufacturer.
The efficiency is as efficient as white light.
Efficiency is closer to white light.
I mean, literally, based on these specifications, it's there, isn't it? 15 milliamp, or watts difference? So you're saying that this new technology that Luminaire would be able to provide us is 3 times the current efficiency for amber lighting?
I'm trying to get too
Right,
technical.
right, I mean, but it's a,
So part
yes or no
of,
answer, I think.
part of the LED that they're using is the white light LED, given it a lower power. And as a lower power, they use more LEDs. They're proposing now has 9 pads, and each pad has 36 LEDs on it.
Altair, right?
And what their philosophy is, it becomes a lower glare fixture, not as bright. They're not putting power out of each LED. So they're able to, in essence, less power, more light coming out. Because of that, it looks like it's closer to the amber LED, because amber LED, they drive a little bit harder, and consume a little bit more wattage.
Power spectral distribution is in the 560 to 500 nanometer wavelength?
560.
160, that's all that's coming out of that amber light?
Yes.
Okay. So is there a reason that we wouldn't take that high efficiency luminaire and just drive it for amber the entire year? I mean, why would we have an example, you know, why would we, besides the fact that it's already approved, the Cree, let's say, or the Visionaire products are much less efficient. So why wouldn't we just take that Luminaire amber and
That is one of the options. And one of the options is,
no, without the dual
But
spectrum, I'm saying.
our recommendation is amber during the turtle season and the benefits of white light during the non-turtle season.
Right. I understand that.
Excuse me, for bowl. Like you make a decision, you're locked in.
But-
So, just by way of example, you could have town council A that says, I want it, as you're suggesting, and then 4 years later, you could have town council B that want it all amber.
Yes, sir.
yes,
And just to be clear, the color of the 2 lights is not configurable. You've got 560 over here, you've got 4,000 over there, and that cannot be changed. What nights they're on, fully configurable. If you were to have something happen early and FWC would say, hey, flip a week earlier, you could flip it a week earlier. If all your nesting was done and there was some other thing that you needed, and this is Deer and Sea Show in Fort Lauderdale, sometimes that would conflict with the end of turtle season. If the permit holder said all the nests are gone, we are good to go, we would then have to send trucks out. With a system like this, if FWC says yes, everything is good, you could flip it a week early. If you wanted to be amber year-round, you could be amber year-round. Be totally configurable.
So also, you're, who, as part of the team, who's the environmental, has the environmental lighting experience? I mean, who would you consider being the environmental specialist on?
All of us have in one aspect or another.
Okay, I mean, because the IES does recognize wildlife lighting, wouldn't you agree?
yes.
Yeah, okay, right. So, I mean, again,
Rick would be our expert.
okay, good. Who lives over in Sarasota? Oh, no, I'm sorry, Rick Hoffman, that's
Hoffman's in
Kramer,
Atlanta.
right, gotcha, right. But again, I mean, based on our original recommendations, we're looking for a 12-month amber for much more. I mean, the turtles are the public, are the public face of the environment here, obviously. And there, you've got Endangered Species Act, you've got regulations, but there's the rest of the community, the rest of biodiversity that we'd like to have protected on the island. And can you tell me, and this is a yes or no question, is shortwave blue light healthy for humans or wildlife organisms?
It's not a yes or no question.
Not about dosage or anything else. I mean, is it good?
No, it's not a yes or no, and dosage does matter. So You can kill yourself by drinking too much water. You can kill yourself by drinking too much oxygen. You have to look at exposure. And when you say blue lighting, there's a whole lot into that.
Shortwave light, I mean, light,
I don't know, I've made it 60 years living with light.
sure.
There is not, you can't do a yes/no answer, I'm sorry, but no.
I'm talking about wildlife too, Joe. I'm talking about.
Fully
the way
understand. Yeah.
Light, shortwave congregates, it disrupts migratory behavior, mating behavior, foraging.
But on the
all
other
those
side,
things.
and when we get to John, I know we're going to hear about the benefits to humans and wildlife for people being able to see things, having vertical illumination.
Well,
So,
I mean, I feel like that this fear-based, visibility, the FDOT has approved safe lighting in the 560 wavelength, nanometer wavelength for luminance. 1 foot candle can be achieved.
yes, sir.
And it meets those requirements, and I doubt FDOT would ever send anything out that's unsafe. You're
FDOT,
suggesting that it needs to be safer, and that's based on CRI and stopping distance.
FDOT has also recommended 4,000K.
No, they don't recommend it. That's the maximum.
Rick, where are we with FDOT and 4,000K?
Here, no. Let me,
Yeah. FDOT, it's the default, it's the preferred, can we,
Maximum.
yes, no, sir.
hold on, Rick, hold on, wait, please.
Can we do this?
Permitting process, if you apply to the state to get a project permitted, would review. And if you don't specify the color, they will issue it.
No.
Not really.
It's the default. So it's not the maximum, it's not the minimum.
You do not, what he just said is if you put in a lighting specification, not put in there explicitly what the color temperature is, DOT assumes it will be.
You can apply for other color temperatures on a case-by-case basis. So you have options. You're not locked into 4,000. For example, the state of North Carolina, their default is 5,000 Kelvin. State of Georgia is 4. States I work with, Illinois, Massachusetts, Iowa, Tennessee, are all 4,000 Kelvin.
States themselves. I believe Georgia's only
State,
3,000 actually, maximum.
see, if you're on a state right-of-way, you have to permit it in your local jurisdiction, lighting on a state right-of-way.
But would you confirm that the city of Chicago, the city of Los Angeles, the city of San Francisco, city of Denver, they all have 3,000K maximums. The country of France has a 3K. I mean, we can go down that list, as you know.
There are exceptions, as I said, that are involved in the permitting process. You can apply for an exception to the state guideline.
I mean, can you comment on that fact that those other municipalities, those other countries, the entire state of Georgia?
It's been in flux. I understood.
Okay.
When LEDs first came out, they were at 6,000.
Of course, yeah. We know
And what was really interesting for me, I was part of conversions of Florida Power and Light from mercury vapor to sodium vapor. Like that change. And we changed communities from HID to LED. The communities that were using metal halide, they liked the 5,000. We're going blue to blue. Communities that were using sodium, like the 3,000 because they were going yellowish, yellow, pink, reddish. There are pluses and minuses. 4,000K is the best color rendition of traffic, and 3,000 is better. And we did when I set up the first program for LEDs with FPL, 1,000 in residential areas, 4,000 around the eye to some. 4,000 though, you get the rendition, you highest level of being.
But I mean, if we walk this all the way back, so again, the safety really is on color rendition, is that correct? I mean, that's the bottom, that's the hook, correct, for the safe, that you have more stopping distance, because you can see the little black, the color of the black, the box that's in the roadway, like they use in studies, correct?
Small.
Stopping distance, I mean, is that what you're?
It's the whole package, it's being able to see colors, it's not just about the color temperature.
Mm-hmm.
If the uniform at the same time with lower light levels,
Correct.
you have higher
You can have full uniformity with amber lighting as well, correct?
uniformity with amber, absolutely. You don't have color rendition,
Mm-hmm.
but you do have uniformity.
Correct. Right. And this, and color and lighting has, what would you say, percentage of contribution to crashes?
Could not do that off the top of my head.
Right. I mean, because there's a lot of other factors, correct? I mean, there's driver behavior. I don't care if there's lights on. If somebody's face is on their phone, they're going to kill you if you're walking. Correct.
That's right.
There's also, I mean, height.
You can't engineer out stupidity, so
Sure, but there's also environmental factors as well, which actually light is one of them, but there's driving conditions, there's equipment failures, and all those things. So I just want to make sure everybody understands that in and of itself, the recognition is not going to save the world. The other difference is, and Ed shared this information, is for Fort Myers Beach, only 25, we're half the national average for nighttime crashes. It's only 25% here on this beach. But as long as safety is concerned, that data is all prior to the addition of 2 sidewalks. Now we have sidewalks on both sides. We have bike lanes. Just the addition of uniform lighting is going to be an enormous, probably the single most impactful change to the Estero Boulevard. And these are all things that contribute to the safety. Again, I just feel like this nighttime color visual acuity contribution is significantly less than you're providing the audience as far as pure safety.
we should table this discussion on.
Okay, yeah, that's absolutely fair. That's absolutely. But again, the reason I bring that up is because it's what's more important, turtles or people. And it's just, that's not the discussion. It never has been. Because you can provide safe lighting, FDOT regulations, using long wavelength lighting. I just want to make sure everybody's aware of that at this meeting, and anybody that's watching from the community. But also, I think that, again, the reason we want, and we've shared this before, I mean, again, we don't want to keep hashing this out, but it's also about the environment. It's about our community. Have you spent time on our beach? I know you came for that. I mean, how much time have you ever spent on the beach?
I've been coming over here since I was 8 years old.
Okay. And
So
you were...
I grew up in Palm Beach,
Mm-hmm.
not Palm Beach, Beach Gardens,
Mm-hmm.
Palm Beach County. And used to come over, when I was a kid, we used to come over here. My father loved to dig clams and beach walk. We'd go to Sanibel. We'd have the family week.
Mm-hmm.
This here,
Mm-hmm.
up and down the coast.
And so the other thing I'd like to discuss, because it's really never even really talked about, is just the contribution to sky glow. You say you can limit it, somehow you're able to keep that genie in the bottle. And we don't talk about the scattering of again, this is off-season, this is tourist season, whatever you want to say with white light. But the sky glow that'll be caused using these short, this blue light, the short wavelength blue light. I mean, it's by calculations, if you're going to increase the illumination of the entire roadway, correct?
No, sir.
Then
I know where you're going.
Then what we have now, you're saying
Yes,
the total illumination will be reduced.
I'm saying, you can't make that direct statement. When you go from HID, and I'll use the word again, light bulb,
Sure,
it just blows light out. The of where that light goes with HID is horrible. We know that. You've got this giant reflector on the top and refractor on the bottom, and you throw that light every which way. LED, back it up a step. I love about LED, man has made light. The caveman on up, you've done something else, you've burned something. One of the byproducts is light. Most of the product is heat. Sodium or fire or gas, you're making. LED is the first one. You put a current through a medium and you cause an electron to jump, and when it comes back, a photon comes out. You have an enormous amount of control over what. Every chip has its own output. One blast of light. Definitely a lot better with LED. Sodium just thrown.
but there's an enormous amount of cases of poor lighting, correct? And it's always, it's bad design, it's always, that's bad design.
We're not bad designers.
So I'm sure they felt the same way. But I will say this, that, I mean, again, is there Raleigh scattering, Maya scattering, right? Short wavelengths, what, is it 10 times? They scatter 10 times more than longer wavelengths? Is that?
Did you hear the question from Mr.
Again,
Johnson?
I mean, I can,
heard that,
and the reason I say that is that, I mean, from the state
universal
law,
Let
lighting
him answer.
answer is, it depends.
hear that?
Depends on what the medium is, what's in the medium. And for example, down there in Florida, you've got a lot of moisture in the air. Causes light to behave differently than when you. A lot of variables at play. That's why it's hard to make a blanket statement that it's always this or it's always that. It's a mix of variables.
Well, what are the presentation meetings, Ricky? I mean, you actually said that light reflects off grass, off sand. I know Joe said that, you know, and I quote, the light reflects off the roadway, it reflects off the pole, it reflects off the buildings. So I just, again, it's even with the amber LED, there's sky glow. These national parks are switching to amber LEDs, and there's still sky glow from amber LEDs. So you can imagine the short wavelength white light is certainly going to throw off more. That's the position that we have, and that we would like to conserve our night skies.
Is that Rick?
I just want to, I'm having trouble hearing. But the thing I want to reinforce is I'm involved within the IES on a special task group advising a document called, probably heard of bug ratings for outdoor luminaires, backlight, uplight, and glare. We're revising that document. Members of the committee, chairman of the Sky Glow Committee. His name is Ian Ashdale. And one of the calls we had recently, meaning that light that goes straight down is reflected off the pavement or the grass, bounces right back up. These what we call nadir directly under the luminaire contributes more to sky glow than in personal opinion, but he's an expert in the area of sky glow. Now, the other thing is on the same committee as Pete Strasser. He is the technical director of Dark Sky. And he agreed with Ian on the nadir dump. The light comes straight down, bounces right back up. They say that contributes more to sky glow than light directly from the luminaire.
I think Ricky said they're looking at recommended angles light to the glow, and that dark skies input.
exactly. Currently, the glare zone begins at 60 degrees vertical. Question is, the old nomenclature began at 80, stating that, and actually the people that developed bug rating using the model lighting ordinance was co-developed by Dark Sky and IE. Said the bug rating has been abused, really. So we're looking at revising the G rating, the glare zone, or better defining.
I got some of it, but yeah, there's been bug ratings and obviously there's still light pollution, so.
By the way, for those that don't know, the bug rating is backlight, uplight, and
There, yeah.
out because of HID. The light that's not going towards the, sometimes you do. In an urban area, sometimes you do want light, certain headlight. Downtown Miami, you have the building. The bug ratings are way defining.
Did you, I think I know the answer to this.
Those housing.
Sorry, I
He
heard.
was just saying, yeah, you're trying to light the roadway, not the window.
That's correct. That's right. That should be the objective. Also, I believe the area to be lit would be wider, would you say, than it is with the two sidewalks, and since we're going, keyhole to the sidewalk, or the center line to sidewalk, that'll increase the amount of light that be required.
Well, yeah, we talked about sidewalk edge to sidewalk.
Right. But just from the current lighting scheme, and it's just old school, yeah, okay. You didn't do any photometric studies on any of these, correct? On any of these, modeled any of these photometrically? It's just the averages,
Well, we did a lot of photometric calculations. That's where these estimates came from.
So the typicals.
Oh, okay, I guess maybe a question would be is again, on this table here, you've got, let's say, the vision air. There's gotta be a mistake here. You show the BSX, which is a small vision air. Correct, if you look at, on the table 2.3C and 2.3D.
Okay, 2.3C and 2.3D.
Correct, you've got, it's got the 12,900 lumens, but yet the spacing is only 80 feet. You've got the Cree, which is the 6,000 lumen output, at 70 feet. So basically, those have the same. Those are the same photometrically, I'd say, correct?
Well, I was.
Because also or it should be the BLX.
Hey, Rick?
Correct?
You recall when the question about why the Visionaire BSX2 spacing was so low in spite of its much larger lumen?
Well, no, those lumens are for the BLX, not the BSX.
Oh, excuse me.
When we want to keep the illuminance and luminance on the roadway, also want to keep uniformity at a maximum level. You have good uniformity. Average demand, the max demand is within the proper parameters. The other thing we've got to optimize is the glare. Roadway lighting, we have a metric called disability glare. We use a veiling luminous ratio to get a glare factor for the luminaire in a lighting design application. So in most cases, that limit is 0.3. You can stay below 0.3, but you can't go more than 0.3. In some designs or some of these layouts, that was the limiting factor. So we had to put them closer. We may be overlighting or minimizing the disability visibility glare that is not only uncomfortable, it's literally blinding. It enables or disables the eye to be able to see. Early blindness, like oncoming headlights, produce disability glare, and we want to make sure the street lights don't produce disability glare. Sometimes that spacing is the glare factor.
That's not my question. The question is that the specifications for the BSX2 is 6,000 lumens. The question is, what IAS table did you use to?
What he's saying is, in some of these layouts, the controlling factor, the amount of, you got the lighting of the roadway, average, max, and glare.
Max, right? Yep. Uniformity, veiling luminance. Yep.
I think Mr. saying that.
I'm saying the BSX2 is not 12,900 lumens. It's 6,000 lumens. What I'm trying to tell you.
Saying that the BSX2, that we've shown the lumen output for the BLX2 and not the BSX2, and that the BSX2 is lumens. That's before you asked if we
The spec sheet.
confirmed that.
It's surprising that recommendations are being made off of these, and it's not, the data's not correct.
Or the BLX, not the BSX.
Oh, I wrote BSX on the table. We'll
We
take
may
a
have
look at
found
that.
the problem. Point, I'm assuming we'll maybe have a break between the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the end, what you're saying is that regardless of the 12,000 lumen or the 6,000, they're both going to be spaced the same.
If they have the same.
We'll have to get back
Yeah,
with
we'll
you.
have to-
If glare is a controlling criteria, possibly yes.
Before we jump into shifting to the Public Safety Committee side, I do want to get IT in here.
I don't think Steve's done yet.
I know, well, I'm just saying, when that way you can actually hear what.
It's fair. It's these recommendations are coming to the town council, and I don't know, I think there's a question on, again, whether the right IES table is used to actually, to model that particular one, correct, and also, I guess my other question had been, again, just that efficiency of, here now you're throwing 16, if 12,900 is producing too much veiling luminance, then what would 16,500 lumens produce? And again, I guess it's dependent on the construction and the luminaire, correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's not, there's absolutely, I don't know.
It's not a function of the lumens, correct? I understand that, but it gives one pause to ask, especially not being lighting experts, but again, I don't know, do we need a break? Is that what you're saying, or do I need to be,
No, well, if you could take a break, that way if you do have any other questions for Rick, that way you guys can, I'd love to get IT in here.
okay, sure, let's, now,
Just take a 2 minute, give us a couple minutes.
Okay,
Brad.
sure.
Please, thank you.
Anybody else then?
Thank you all for that. Hopefully we can do.
Perfect, all right, so it just, I guess in closing, at least from my feedback, and not taking in the rest of the committee's feedback, is just that, again, this recommendation here is in direct opposition to our stakeholder feedback, and I feel like that stakeholder feedback, there's no stakeholder feedback that's gone into these recommendations, that the entire process was really an exercise in futility, that there's been no feedback that's been afforded the groups during the process. So I did have one last question. Oh, the mounting height. What on the luminaires, what mounting heights did you use? Same for all of them, or?
Rick, there's a question about the mounting height. I wanted to know what mounting height we used.
There we go.
Oh, excellent.
I believe it was 25 feet.
25, and is that because you're using the FPL utility poles?
The FPL utility poles, typically you'll be between 24 and 26 feet. So to be able to try to do apples and apples, yes.
Correct, yes. And any of the town-owned, did you use that same model, or would you, any town-owned or non-FPL solution, were you planning on putting poles on the side of the boulevard?
That, Rick, do we plan on putting poles on the eastern side of the boulevard in the parametric calculations?
Not at this point, we haven't. The problem we have there is that most roadway luminaires have more what we call street side light, a light projected across the street from the pole, and they have less house side light. In this case, that's good to have the poles, as Joe said, lined up on the beach side of the street. That way you're projecting more light across the road, away from the beach, and less behind the pole towards the beach. Now, as we raise the mounting height, we'll have more light find its way to the beach. That's when we have to add shielding, and then we add more shielding. Other things come into play. It's kind of a process of trial and error at a point where you try this and then you try that, and each iteration you get a little better at it. You home in on an ideal solution.
But any of the town-owned solutions, any non-FPL solutions are not allowed to use the FPL poles. Correct?
Correct.
Correct. So any of these that were town-owned, to see, anything that's shown as town-owned, right now those are modeled using FPL, using the west side of the Gulf side of the boulevard. Is that correct?
Right, we had.
Instead of saying that we have to put poles up the entire length of the east side, correct?
We're trying to stay away from the east side of the road.
Right, so you're pushing toward the FPL, an FPL solution.
No, not
Where
necessarily.
would you put the poles?
Between the FPL poles and the sidewalk is just like,
So you would continue to put more poles on the Gulf
we
side?
need more poles, right?
Or town-owned poles.
Yes, sir.
Did we use a
That's
mounting
gonna look
height,
rough.
any other than 25 feet for these preliminary models? Go lower, or?
And those would not need to be at 25.
I have used higher mounting heights. I did a round of calcs with 35 feet, and I did a round with 25 feet.
Go lower?
That's a nightmare, yeah.
Now, in your text, I didn't go below 25 because when you do that, you're automatically requiring shorter pole spacing. Most roadway luminaires are designed for a spacing to mounting height ratio of 6:1, pretty much a norm in the U.S. In Europe, the norm is 4:1. In Australia, it's 10:1. So when you start getting above 6:1, you have trouble with dark spots in between poles. Because, manufacturers have to optimize something. look at a typical family of roadway luminaires, there's like 4. They try to narrow that down as much as possible.
Is there FWC guidelines to, I believe, for height, mounting height?
The main FWC thing comes into play at 12 feet. They have different regulations above and below 12, stringent above 12. When we did our tests, and we actually used our lightning, the lightning lab in Rivera Beach. We used the mezzanine inside of there with FWC, and there was nothing. And Robin was with us. It was Robin, me, and Tonya. There was no maximum height at the time. I've not heard of any maximum height with FWC. We told them we would be in the 24 to 26 foot range, and that's what we worked at. We set test stands up. They came out. They made their checks. So
I think that was a compromise because of for the distribution poles, I think. I mean, I don't,
and space on the pole is allocated. National Electric Safety Code says who goes where.
Sure, absolutely.
Nobody can below 16 feet. Comms, boom, boom, boom.
Right.
And the street lights are in that band between the comms and the secondary.
Right, but I'm saying there's a compromise because they understand there's requirements for FPL distribution poles.
There was no point on maximum. There are street lights and one utility that Florida Power and Light is buying counts above the primary. But it was never mentioned. I've never heard of any height regulation from it.
Yeah, I want to talk about your recommendations.
I guess I'm not gonna talk about the lights, the color. I think more than covered that. I do want to look at the report itself. I've got questions in there, and also I've got concerns about how this is written to be turned into the council. So that's what I want to kind of address. It's interesting, Joe, you mentioned Caveman, because I think they were the original committee that started working on this street lights way back when. It's been that long, but that goes to my first question. When you talk about the existing one and that it is not acceptable, it's not a recommendation, it's our current one, but you don't indicate in there if there's any legal issues with staying with that. What is the implication if we just say, no, we're not going to do anything? Are there any legal implications? Are there any safety implications? And if there's not, it should be noted in there so that they know that there is nothing, that it will be held against either the town or the county, because that goes to the sense of urgency about this.
There have been some changes in state of Florida liability, and maybe Rick can answer that. He knows it better. I think Roger might be familiar with that as well.
Yeah. I do work for an engineering firm, and we get involved in litigation. Currently, there's a lawsuit in one state for not providing sufficient lighting. It was a fatality in an accident. The state, the county, and there is no local jurisdiction. It's county. Are both being sued by the deceased family.
And again,
so there are potential litigation.
That's
if you don't do a decent job of lighting.
And that's my point is, I think that in your report to the council, you need to highlight for them that there are implications or potential implications. And the other side of that is, talking to the town attorney, is it a town liability? Is it a county liability because it's a county road, but we pay for the lights? How actually would that work? The answer, I'm not asking for an answer now, but it's something I think you need to address when you present back to the council as to a sense of urgency in moving forward and what their potential liability or risk is if they don't.
So, since you brought it up, I think it's important for it to be on the record that if we have nothing to do with the lighting system, that's the clearest situation from a liability standpoint, because then it's 1,000,000% county. Can we touch something? Greater our touch, or potential we can be brought into just rate. So, if you want to say from a liability standpoint, what's the best thing to do? The best thing for us to do is get out of the lighting business.
Again, I
That's
think that
for
needs to
south-
be,
South of Crescent, right?
you know, as a consultant, I think you need to bring that forward to the council, that they understand there are risks, and there are decisions they can make to mitigate some of those risks. When you get to 2.2, the white LED, Suzanne, when you were running through this, you said there are shielding issues, and that's all you said. Could you explain what you meant by shielding issues?
Well, as an FPL system, maybe Joe could, that when there is there's a light that's seen from the beach, it's perceived a initiator of a disorientation event. That light is either turned off or needs to have some solution applied to it. And working with FPL just introduces another step in that resolution process. Otherwise, they just turn it.
And this is my confusion is because I've heard said that you can provide shielding that would be turtle friendly. And therefore, if that's the case, if you can design this using white LED with proper shielding, angles, design, that it would be turtle friendly, we would need to turn those off. That's not what you're saying.
That's harder to do with the FPL system because there's more options. It's easier to do with the town system.
You want to go a little farther? I don't understand. I understand the difference between the town owning and control and the other, but can you or can you not design, using FPL, for example, a white LED system that would, with shielding and angles and the proper LED, that would be turtle friendly or not?
I would not say so. Would you?
So if we can put the question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you have FPL and town-owned. With town-owned, I think you can. With FPL-owned, there's definitely doubt, because FPL has one shield, one mounting style, two fixtures. The options are limited if you see it from the beach. And FPL is not going to come out 2-3 nights in a row while we tweak it and we look at it from the beach. We're not going to do that. With a town-owned system, you do have that ability in the off-season to be able to look, can we see it from the beach? What do we want to do? There are much more options with a town-owned system for being able to shield.
I'll say what I heard, and then you tell me if I'm correct.
Yes, sir.
You're saying FPL, we cannot get the service we need in order to perfect the system.
Yes, sir.
And they don't have the shielding.
They don't have the offerings. FPL has a very, very small palette. I actually built that list. And we tried to design, you know, we got a couple of Type 4s, a couple of Type 5s, a couple of this, and we built a simple palette. It is not, an FPL is restricted from being in direct competition with commercial providers. So that's why FPL doesn't have the fancy lights, the pretty lights, all of this stuff. It would be competitive. FPL is required to offer street lighting because FPL gets poles put in the right of way. But FPL is not a lighting provider. So what they offer you is in a very narrow band.
Okay.
So just to add to that, not that I want to constantly, people are going to be watching this. Try to customize a shield to address a situation, and it may or may not be in FPL's palette. You may get to the point that you may have tried 3 or 4 or 5 different customizations and it's still not getting the desired effect, and the fault would be, at that point, you'd have to turn off that.
Or relocate it.
Relocate it.
Relocate it, yeah.
So, have more flexibility in a town managed system because there would be more ability to customize a shield. But even within the range of customizations, it's not a guarantee that you can find a solution.
Interrupt, but are you saying that with a town-owned 4K white LED system, that's turtle friendly?
No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying, I'm answering John's question, which is, with regard to shielding, is shielding the panacea of solutions? And the answer is no. So what I'm saying is that if you white light system, will run the risk of having to turn off lights to accommodate environmental concerns. Not a guarantee that you won't. It's definitely a possibility that you won't be able to address every situation, and you will need to turn off lights. I'm with you, Steve.
Something else that you want to add?
No, I'm assuming you asked because, you know, the public safety recommendation was to choose one single color, one single lumen.
And I think that's still ours is, and so that comes up in a second here. The other thing in 2.2, if I'm reading this right, regardless of whether we go with white LED, amber LED, or the dual, we need to add approximately 100 poles at about 13,000 a pole.
That was the best guess without being able to talk to FPL about this particular project, yes.
The 100 poles
Yeah.
is a good estimate. The 13 is the top end if you put it in the
that's
distribution line, correct?
Fairly a top estimate.
So we know that we have a base cost to the town, regardless of which way we go here, of about 1.3 million just to add the poles that are needed. If we can even properly space those, have you looked at that with all the driveways and everything else out there?
We haven't looked at that specifically, other than to say that it's probably done just with our, you know, driving it, looking to see where the spacing of the poles are now, what we're likely to need. Yes.
'Cause that's basically doubling the number of poles that exist.
Is that a fair assessment, Rick, to have a compliant?
Could be, yes. One thing I'd like you folks to keep in mind is that when you did the drive-through and did the video, there were a lot of extraneous light sources on the sides of the road. Some were coming from maybe a hotel or a restaurant or a parking lot. And one thing that we've got to take into consideration is that what we call surround lighting or the surrounds. The ambient lighting is high, and the roadway lighting has to be analogous high to accommodate that, because the driver will have a hard time seeing pedestrians and cyclists if they're blinded by parking lot lighting, and the lighting on the road itself is very minimal. That's something to be taken into consideration, is that ambient light level.
I was going to bring this up later, but you kind of went into it a little bit here, and that is the disorientations. Actually, there's two questions on that. How many disorientations are there, and are they tracked? Because the original MPO study, we tried to raise this issue, and it got waylaid when it got to the council, is the original MPO study 2-3 years ago now talked about number of devices that were broken, installed improperly, et cetera. And we had asked if the disorientations related to those lights or the other lights down there. And now you bring up, you know, the surround lighting from parking lots, hotels, people's houses, pool areas, whatever. When we turned off, and Steve told me, I think it was 60 lights last year. Are those mapped to disorientations? Are they mapped to the nest? How do you determine which lights you're going to turn off and which lights just the white?
Let me answer part of that. Lights that are turned off are on the FPL cut list. So FPL has a list of lights that get cut off every year. If there's a disorientation, typically it goes straight to the cut list. That list is reviewed every year. It's a copy of it's given to FWC. It should make it. Who's with the permit holder?
Time.
Do you get the cut list?
Of course, we help put it together. Basically, from the beach.
Holder for review every year, and additions and subtractions should be made by the permit holder through FWC to FP&L. FPL is the executor, but not the arbitrator of the cut list.
Correct, yeah, and those are identified, I mean, by also our environmental, guy over here, Chad, but basically anything that's visible from the beach gets turned off. That's what that is.
Now, do you look at shielding beforehand? Do you look to see if maybe this one could get shielded, or do you go straight to the cut list?
Cut list, I mean, we notify them to to mitigate the problem.
Yeah, and I've seen that across the board. It is something, some of the permit holders do try to shield first and some don't. It is something to look at. I noticed there are very few shields actually along Estero, and it's something even in this interim now.
I think that plays to your point that for FP&L, really, I don't know, side responsibility or whatever. So for them, it's probably just easier to turn off the bulb than to try to figure out a shielding solution. Based to your earlier question.
Right, actually, and so now, just for awareness, starting 4 years ago, cut list was automated. So anywhere you see the blue photo cells on the lights, which would be all the FPL lights here, that cut list is an Excel that gets converted to a CSV file and gets uploaded into the system. So it's actually a calendar function within the smart light system.
Right.
And it's got whether, there's two nesting seasons in the state of Florida. So it whole list.
Yeah, all I'm trying to say is that what all FPL has to do, I think my experience that at some point they don't want to monkey around with shielding too much, and they'll go to just put it on the cut list.
No, sir. No, sir. No, if FPL is asked, shield this light. It used to be $265. Point to the light, you tell your account manager which one, and they'll shield the light.
I understand that, but then the shielding's not working, or it's not,
Well, then you, right, if the shield isn't enough,
So-
then you go.
So in the case of expediency, in some cases, just like, hey, I'll just try to.
On the cut list. Yeah. And that is what happens a lot.
Point.
And my question was really going to, with this new design, with shielding, if we're doing, I'm still on 2.2, if we do shielding and do all that, if it was 60, what would the number, we expect it to be dramatically dropped if they have proper shielding from 60 to, I don't know, 10, 5, 0. Is that your expectation if we do 2.2? 2.2 is the white LED. I'm just following there.
What we didn't do is look at the reduction, if any, of disorientations before the lights were turned out and after, and that was basis to.
Basically, I'm trying to find out, because you say in here and see that contrary to public belief, it's possible for a design to roadway lighting, et cetera, with white sensitive LED. The 2.2 is, it sounds to me as I read that it's feasible solution. That's for this.
It's doable, but, as you were saying, and as the manager was saying, this whole design decision is an exercise in mitigation of risk. And to me, although I think it's possible to design a system that way, the workload and the iterations make it not one of our recommendations.
And where reading this, I have a great degree of trouble, and this is what you've all been kind of alluding to, is that your last sentence there, this is the preferred option for functionality of driver, pedestrian, cyclists, and all nighttime road users during the entire year. You tell me that, you tell the council that this is the preferred thing to protect pedestrians, and then you make a recommendation later on that says, but part of the year, we're going to go to something that's less preferred for pedestrians. That, to me, if I'm sitting up on that dais, I'm saying, wait a minute here. Now what you're telling me is you're going to tell me that part of the year, this is the best thing to do, but, during turtle season, those that are left around here, we're going to give you less lighting. I'm not saying whether white or amber is that. I'm saying that your report, to me, conflicts with a decision they have to make by telling me that 2.2 is the best for pedestrians, and yet you're giving me a recommended option that's different than that. So that's a concern I have for that. The other, and this is jumping ahead a little bit, when you talk about the 2-light option, we talk about, because we've been talking about turning off, let's say you go to the 2-light option, is it feasible instead of turning off, today we turn off X lights, whatever's on the list to reduce the white glare, or the white light. instead of turning them off, leaving white on in those 60 or whatever number that's reduced by better shielding that, and turning those to the amber only. What would the effect of that be? Instead of going to, today, white lights, turn them off, in the future it would be white lights, change instead of turning them off, turn to amber. Would that be feasible, and would that improve the visibility to a degree that's more acceptable? Understand the question?
We talked about that. We'll call it selective amber.
Okay.
And there is a viability to that.
Happens to the eye, the brain. Transitioning in and out of white to amber.
The color change, yeah. Rick, what?
Basically, going to amber versus going to black.
Right.
This is an area where there hasn't been a lot of research performed. So, we would prefer not to, have you driving through red than white and so on. So,
As an
if
option,
nothing else, would probably be annoying.
as an option, would that be better than turning off that light? If the light were amber instead, would that be an improvement over turning off the light?
Yeah, would probably be preferred, be sunlight versus no light.
And that's really my question is, this way, if we have roughly, what do we've got, 100 and some lights out there now, about 130, we turn about half of them off, which is kind of incredible. But if we could take areas and reduce that, if we're gonna have 230 lamps out there, or poles out there, and we can reduce that down and have the majority of them having the better white LED, because there is no effect on the beach, on the wildlife, and we can use amber to minimize the light differential for the drivers, pedestrians, to keep some visibility as opposed to black, and still at the same time provide the necessary visibility or lack of visibility for the wildlife on the beach. I just think that that should be addressed in here. And I don't know the answer, I'm raising the questions.
And there's still, get clear, there still can be amber lights that will have to be shielded. There still could be amber lights that would have to be relocated or turned off, depending on placement and view from the beach. Amber itself is not a guarantee that the light can stay on.
I was just gonna mention, the proper turtle lighting according to FWC is keep it long, wavelength, shielded, correct? And, remind me of the third one?
Low, mounted low.
Exactly, keep it low. So that's where these mounting heights are an issue.
No, the
Just
low
throwing it out
gets
there.
and where I was headed was, you have two things. You have where the light lands, and then you have the visibility of the point source. No matter what the light is, you're not allowed to see the point source of the light from the beach.
Right, but you also recognized earlier during a stakeholder meeting that, our ordinance is indirect light as well, direct, indirect, and cumulative. Obviously, sky glow.
Backing on to Rick's, when we drove up and down, there's a couple of sections, there's an enormous amount of light coming from some of the commercial properties. To have an ordinance for that, and
We do.
that will
We have someone who drives the beach turtle season, before turtle season and during turtle season, for sources of light that would be disruptive to the environment. We have that going on. Turtle time folks who out there daily provide us with information of lighting issues that they see, and those are investigated and dealt with. We have an ongoing program throughout the length of turtle season.
Understood. On Estero, when you're on the road, out to Crescent, there's a couple of commercial properties that are lit almost to what a car dealership will light to. And it's one of the resort places with a Hawaiian name. There's a couple of t-shirt shops. And there's two things. One, you're getting sky glow from that. You're getting a lot of sky glow. But two, what Rick was just saying, we will have to bring up the street lighting to that high level of light in order not to have a disability glare from that other light. And is there an ordinance within the town that these commercial places have to
I don't
follow?
believe there is a highlight standard, if you would call it that. Currently in place. Limits how bright they could be.
That would be helpful across the board, to just take a look at some of the
You
lights.
could add that to your suggestion.
Yes, sir, we got that.
That's in our, I mean, that was in the specs, basically. We're trying to look at dark skies compliance and looking at the lighting ordinance. Yeah, that's a problem. It's been 30, I mean, it's nothing new. It's 30 years going on. It's a constant battle, and that's why I think it's important for the town to show stewardship, the right practices for the residents and the business owners.
Yeah, there's a lot of legacy things. The FPL is almost certainly legacy. So back 30 years-ish ago, Florida Power and Light ran feeder down the road, and somebody with the town said, hey, we'd like some lighting. The FPL said, how much? He said, well, put one on every pole. And that's how, honestly, because I used to be on the engineering side. Mike used to be on the construction side. Put a light on every pole. How big? Well, this is what we got. So you get these legacy systems just because you've evolved into it. And the same thing with the commercial lighting problem.
So if I'm reading this right, the spacing for the amber or the LED white is the same spacing?
I think for the amber, the LED white is the same spacing. I think that's what we got.
Yeah.
Cool.
We tried to match them, so you don't have, but the amber is the controlling factor. As I can get, white LED that can provide much greater space.
We use the amber as a base to set lighting and then match.
So that 1.3 million is misleading then. If you went with white LED, you wouldn't need necessarily 100 poles.
If you had no amber.
Right, that's my question. So when this report goes to council, as I read it right now, it's saying that you're going to invest $1.3 million in these poles because you need 100. But what I'm hearing now is that if we do white LED, that we would need less poles because we could provide greater spacing.
Right.
So that should be indicated to the council.
That would mean, though, a higher pole mounting height, lower poles.
It would be a lower cost to the council.
Yes, sir.
Again, I'm not advocating for one or the other. I'm trying to line up issues that I think the council needs to hear that aren't clear to me in the report. This dual source, the other thing here with the dual source amber, that is the recommendation. Neither of these products, this product's not approved by FPL or by Florida Wildlife, right?
Correct.
So this has to go through that 3 to 6 to X number of months worth of study. When Florida Wildlife is going to start doing certifications again. So we don't know. This could be delayed 6 months. It could be delayed a year and a half. We could be without even moving forward on a design for another 6 to 18 plus months.
No guarantee.
Yes. Okay. And then the standalone solar, I see it's here. There's no analysis. Can you tell me again why that's in here?
We were asked to take a look at it, and I took a look at it, and there was just not enough time or information provided in the literature that we had to do a calculation. What we did was just extrapolate the claims of the literature that we had for the distance of the roadway that we drove.
Did you ask for the solar?
No, I passed it along to town, the town. It was an interesting project. I mean, we had asked for
So
benchmarks.
just to be clear about that, for everyone's benefit, any input we receive from the committee members of the public, saying, why don't you hire 5 guys, 5 tall basketball players with a candle on their heads, we forward all that to consultant, anything we received. So any extraneous emails from any of the committee members or the public regarding this issue were forwarded to the consultant for their evaluation.
I have the 100% plan for that as well. I mean, if.
Do you have the technical specs?
Yeah, sure.
If you could pass them along, we have, yeah.
I mean, I'm not, I just thought that was interesting, because obviously, energy savings is an issue, and carbon footprint was something you brought up quite heavily early on, to move toward the high-efficiency white. So, that was a solution I thought might be interesting to the town.
We want to see it. I have a lot of engineering questions on how they actually built that, from a wind standpoint, a lot of concerns, so.
That was actually one of the areas was a benchmark area. I mean, Ed actually lives in Sarasota. And, the feedback originally from the stakeholder was that they were using high-pressure lights. Their feedback was for that. Again, I mean, just, don't mean to be too critical about your benchmarking, but Treasure Island also isn't very accurate either, I think, when, you reported that as well.
So the reason I raise that is, again, there is no analysis on this. It's just Sarasota is doing something on this, and so you're raising it. Again, it's more data points for the council without any recommendations or anything other than, look at this is somebody's doing this.
Yeah.
Okay. Then we get into, we look at these dual amber and the fact that Florida Power doesn't currently use them. I'm, again, very concerned about inventory on any of these new products that come up and the guarantee by Florida Power and Light, assuming they stay with them, that they have the inventories. We're in a high hurricane zone here, and that's one of the concerns about the town owning it. Taking ownership is inventory and maintenance, and so I would be the same concern if introducing new products to Florida Power and Light or anyone, that you can say that they have the inventories and the inventories will be available in a disaster.
Florida Power and Light, I've got a high confidence in inventory for FPL.
Of these products?
Any product that FPL puts on the list. So FPL keeps a storm material list, and actually there's two lists. There's less than Cat 3 and a Cat 3 above list. When a storm, as Mike is familiar with the machinations that go on, when a storm is forecast to actually make landfall, Florida Power and Light puts the manufacturers on notice. The street lights are done after the last meter is hooked up, which usually gives you a pretty good lead time. Company does really good at putting things back up again.
And if the town, so this goes into the next part here is, if the town took this over, I'm not really clear on the cost because I tried to map that to the charts and that. And then there's a statement deals with the solar, but bottom line, if the town were to take over the lighting from Florida Power and Light, and let's just say the cost, whether it's turnkey through one of those others or the town itself taking ownership, what would the initial investment be? And then what is the estimated maintenance cost of doing that, as far as the staff would be, or whether we're doing a turnkey? I didn't find, I mean, it's probably in here somewhere, but I couldn't pull that number out that says, because we've talked about Power and Light not necessarily providing the same level of service the town would provide if it did it on its own, or possibly even had a turnkey where they had someone come in and they had more control over them. What is the bottom line cost for initial implementation and then ongoing maintenance if the town were to take over?
Astronomical.
I just want to try to get it.
It'd be, I mean, I don't see any way that the town cannot stay with FPL. I mean, who knows, I mean, our stock and so forth and maintenance, time that, we got a certain amount of days to put lights back on, but I'm just saying it's,
Back and forth, the company makes money on street lights. You pay for that light every month forever.
Well, I think the point is that thinking, John, it's going to be a very expensive proposition. Not going to be the town staff in all probability. It's going to be cost plus 20%. okay? And at the end of the day, if it's supposedly a 3-day repair or overnight repair, whatever thresholds you pay, you set, the faster it is, the more you're gonna pay. Okay? And, you know, if the contractor doesn't do it, you know, at the end of the day, what do? You fire them and you try to find someone else, and they're gonna say, well, they got fired and they were charging this, so I'm gonna charge more. You know, so it's gonna be one of those types of deals. So it will be a proposition, whether it's a turnkey, install and maintain, or it's install, you know, go through a warranty period and then hire a contractor to maintain. It's gonna be an expensive proposition. Be very difficult for probably that type of firm to respond to after a hurricane, because that we wouldn't be their only client, and therefore they're gonna have multiple clients calling for their attention. I mean, unless you're like FPL, where you could pull people in from other states and things, you know, it's gonna be very
just during a
difficult to get a
storm, though.
timely response.
That's just.
So, it's gonna be a very serious consideration within all the other considerations, you know, with respect to this project.
And what I'd like is a ballpark estimate of what that would be. We talk about Florida Power and Light, and we imply in here that, you know, some of our discussion this morning was, if the town owned it, we would be able to do better shielding, better prevention, you know, possibly use white LED because we can do all these things. But the reality is, if the town cannot afford to do that, if the cost is so high and so great, that's not a realistic proposal to say we can do that. So let's have a ballpark number of what that is, so the council can either say, yes, we can continue down this white LED and shielding and doing all that, or no, it just does, we can't afford to do that. We have to go with Florida Power and Light as our supplier. This is the constraints of Florida Power and Light. These are the options of Florida Power and Light. I'm concerned that with that council, we give them options that are not realistically either financially feasible or design feasible because of the support we get from, as you talked about with Florida Power and Light. That if I read this, and I read this a couple times, I read this and it says, white lights work and it's best for pedestrians, so damn it, let's do white lights. But that's not what I'm hearing in the discussion. Because what I'm hearing is that you can't do proper shielding with this particular vendor. I'm hearing that amber has improved so much that it might, I've not seen any amber that show me that it works, but let's say it does. But this report implies that white LED could work, and I'm not hearing that that's feasible, because white LED would still require us to turn off lights, and if it's half our lights, or 60 out of 130, that's absolutely ridiculous to design something like that. If there's the option of going dual, where we can get amber and, you know, maybe minimize that some, but let's be realistic about what we're really proposing here, instead of allowing the council to drift off into, well, that's a possibility. So I think we need to give them the most information we can when they get this report, and not leave gaps like this. The other thing, so this is going back now, I'll leave that for a second. I want to go back to the original recommendations that came from the committee. The side street lighting, you said we don't talk about that, but that is a big concern. And I forgot which one of you picked this up, but it is that transition from side street lighting to the main street lighting, Estero Boulevard. And I don't know if that was addressed in here or not. I didn't really see it, but that's a gap that we have in there that somehow needs to be filled, because we do have a lot of side streets with a lot of lighting coming off of that. I think we also have to, has there been a conversation with the county about is this still a county road, as to what they will or will not allow on their road? I think that, again, is a discussion that needs to take place before it goes to the council, as to, you know, if we make a recommendation for dual or white or amber, if the county says, nope, we're not doing it, okay, we went down this path in several months with the county that owns the road overruling us. The other, and I know Steve and I, we have different views on it. We've heard different responses, I'll put it that way. I've talked to people in the fire department, and I've talked to people at the high levels in the sheriff's department, and they tell me that amber is a concern for them, that white lights work better for them. Yet somewhere in some of these reports, it indicates that that's not an issue for them. So I think clarifying that with an actual statement from, Captain Layler and Chief Love would be beneficial so that various reports aren't conflicting as they read through all this volume of information. The other thing that we asked for, and I don't really hear it, and I tried to listen to Steve and Joe and Ed going through all the light numbers and all that, but what is the visibility difference between the amber that's being proposed and the white light? And what is that difference in, whether you call it stopping range, whatever it is? I haven't really seen that. I hear about long wave, short wave, blue, red, pink. I just want to know, as somebody who's not an engineer, what is that light different? What's the difference, whether it's amber, whether it's you decided it's stopping or visibility? We do have great sidewalks now, and with that, and we've got bike lanes, and with that, we are dramatically increasing the number of people walking that night that wasn't there before. The bike lanes, we have people now riding in the road that still we don't have an educated driver yet that's really watching out for them. And so if they are smart enough to have lights on their bike, good for them. A lot of them don't. So give us some definition of, if it's under amber, you can see them at 10 feet. If it's under white LED, you can see them at 50 feet. Whatever it is, some kind of non-engineering example of the difference between amber and white, I think would be very helpful for the council members, but also the public in general. We kind of beat on that. I won't get on that anymore. And then we had just yesterday or Saturday, whatever day we got this, the committee got from the Sea Turtle Conservancy. They raised some issues about and I'll bring these up here because they sent it to task force members. You got this, Steve, right?
Yep.
In here, they raised some issues about the fixtures, the dual light fixtures versus a single light. Fixtures will not have the same light output as a strictly white or strictly amber fixture, necessitating the need for more fixtures. Have you guys seen this?
Yeah, that's not a true statement.
Okay, that's my question. I
There's
just wanted to make sure you
two
saw
statements
this.
in there that are not correct.
Right, so this will be, we can address this if the council
We
brings
will
this up.
address that.
Okay. So at that point, I said my piece, Steve said his, so.
I
Roger?
wanted to speak a little bit about, since you mentioned Lee County. So you're right, that's Lee County's road. And they'll have a say about what the eventual outcome is. Having worked in county government for 30 years prior to becoming town managers, their general philosophy is that if you stray too far from the reservation, they will just say, well, here's an amount of money, you do the project, you assume 100% of the liability, and pat you on the back and wish you good luck. So, depending upon what the final recommendation is, if they feel it's too far out of their comfort zone, that's likely what they're, if they participate at all.
Is that with you?
Yeah, Jennifer with the Marine Resource Task Force. And I have a question. Did you, were you hired by the town with this dual light as already a plan? Recommendation. How did you learn about the dual light?
So,
What research did you do?
can answer that probably. So, I developed amber light that's now on the FPL list. It's ended up being one manufacturer, but with FWC a number of years ago. And we talked about the possibility of doing that at that time. The technology was not there. About 4 years ago, the technology was developed for the photocell to be able to talk into the fixture and be able to switch back and forth. And 2017, I started discussions on doing this, but we didn't have traction. The world wasn't ready for it. The technology wasn't ready for it. It is something, though, we talked about right at the beginning, that it'd be really great not to go have to take one down or put one up. I mean, right now, the town in Times Square, you guys actually change the lamps. You physically go out there and make the change. There's about 3 technologies that are involved with this, and they're all finally coming together. And so it's one of the things that's been in the back of my mind, but we hadn't developed it yet. We hadn't gotten manufacturers on board yet. First discussion that I had with this was with FPL. If we were to develop something like this, would they be willing to put it in the offerings? And FPL is ready for that too. It's not about the town specifically. The problem is from Texas, North Carolina. There is a lot of pent-up demand. There are people, somebody mentioned earlier about it, why bother? There are places with 8 months of the year, their lights are off, so they don't bother to put ones on. Whether or not this fits here doesn't matter, but this is a technology that is ready to come out.
Jennifer, I could just add a little bit. When I went to a professional conference, you know, they usually all have a room with various vendors or manufacturers and things. They're all working on this problem because they know that it's a problem that exists, and they're trying to work out a solution in their own minds that solves as many of the issues as possible. Obviously, it doesn't solve them all. So there's a universe outside this room, much larger universe that's aware of this problem and working on this problem independent of whatever we do. So that's going on, and as these people, you know, make progress in developing their product, they're sending out news releases and things of that nature. As was said, it's a bigger issue than Fort Myers Beach or Lee, or even the state of Florida.
I do work with a number of manufacturers, and Rick has talked to some, and Joe has talked to some. And a lot of manufacturers have this on their list, their task list, as projects, future projects that are going to bear. Several of them have already reacted and have not offered product. LED system. More will be coming out as time. Something that a lot of manufacturers, major roadway lighting manufacturers, are looking at.
This is, by the way, this is the next evolution of tunable lighting. So there has been, tunable lighting is out. I don't know if you know it, Walmart uses tunable lighting. If they want to sell more apples, they'll dial it a little bit more red so they pop a little better. They want to sell, they want you to notice the linen section, and over in that section they'll dial a little bit blue so the whites pop a little bit better. There's some DOTs that are working with tunable lighting to, when it snows and gets icy, it changes the reflectivity. You tune the light to the condition of the roadway. Tunable lighting really came out 3-4 years ago. This is the next step. You cannot tune what we're talking about. You have to have 2 different sets. But it is the evolution of the lighting spectrum.
And just as, I guess, a final word on this matter, the government is a lot of sort of monkey see, monkey do. So, Lighthouse Point does something, and it seems to be successful, then all that surrounding cities also, well, why aren't we doing what they're doing? And they start moving that direction, and then the next band of municipalities around that will also react in that way. So sort of the manufacturers, I would say, are probably competing to be that first in product that solves the majority of the problems, because if they can get it in and get it installed somewhere, their anticipation is, I would suspect, that many other government entities will see that it sees that we or someone else has gone through all this pain, come up with something that meets most of the issues and is being installed and seems to be working well, that they will get an avalanche of business of people saying, well, we want the same thing, why do they have something better than we have, and so on and so forth. So I think, you know, outside this room, that's already going on in the business world. How to sort of be that Nike, if you will, of environmentally sensitive safety lighting.
So does that 4,000 Kelvin light, is that good for the environment? Does it hurt the environment?
I'm not sure how to answer that. I'm going to go back.
Is it wildlife friendly?
I'm going to go back to what I said at the beginning. All things in moderation. You have to look at things in their context. You can drink too much water and be sick. You can have too much oxygen and you can die. Light needs to be balanced.
You live to be 60.
Yes.
However, you get to turn off the lights at night and go to sleep. Wildlife can't. If you have those bright lights, wildlife is disoriented, okay, and it's not good for wildlife.
That's the beauty, the benefit of LED, to be able to put the light where you want it and not have it where you don't want it.
You can't put a fence on wildlife and tell wildlife not to go in where that 4,000 Kelvin. Okay, so, do you have any
Yeah, wait,
financial-
Rick would like to answer that last
sure.
statement.
Yeah. When we make a decision to develop an area, we're going to interfere with the habitats of a lot of different species in the process. And it's unavoidable, but it happens. I know the Federal Highway Administration came out with a mandate 3 or 4 years ago that when we added lighting in new areas from a state standpoint, we needed to consider bat habitats. So I got the project to GDOT to investigate bat habitats and what affects them. And ironically, in the case of bats, the lighting was actually helpful because the lighting attracted insects, which the bats feed on. And the insects attracted the bats, and the bats ate the mosquitoes. They love mosquitoes, which we consider useful. And they also eat bugs that are harmful to crops.
You can say that the
So
moon
it's kind
and
of
the
like
stars.
a win-win from that perspective.
You can say the moon
So
and
that's just one example. I'm sure there's examples where lighting at night is not beneficial to species.
natural. Natural
May I
light.
interrupt? You know, we have listened to you very patiently. We have listened to you to the point that we are up to here with your same arguments. What now? It's our turn to speak. You don't need to refute our arguments about wildlife. We deal with them every morning here. Please let Jennifer finish.
Thank you, Rose. So, do any of you have a financial stake in this dual lighting? So, to my understanding, watching the first stakeholders meeting, you have been pushing a particular kind of dual light fixture to be installed on Estero Island. By using a dual white amber light, and this is a sentiment from John as well, to switch back and forth during the year on Estero Boulevard, it is implying that the amber street lighting used half of the year is unsafe. Information that is in your recommendation seems misguided, and that by using a white light half of the year to protect the public during high season is an irresponsible rhetoric. FPL, FDOT, FWC approves, authorizes, and implements amber streetlights for safety of humans and wildlife. With that said, I have a question in regards to the stakeholder and advisory committee outreach. 4A, question, what are the neighboring Floridian coastal communities doing for streetlights in wildlife-sensitive areas? Your answer was Treasure Island Police and Fire Departments have expressed opposition to the amber installation. The light quality has been subjectively described as muddy, similar to low-pressure sodium, with poor discernment of color. Who did you speak with in Treasure Island to give you this information?
I believe his name was
Stacy Gallup? Stacy Boyles?
Stacy Boyles.
She told you that.
That's what she said.
We've spoken to her many times.
Okay.
Well,
so,
let her finish.
She's with the Treasure Island Police Department?
The
Project manager.
Assistant Director, Public Works Director for Treasure Island.
But you say here the Treasure Island Police and Fire Departments have expressed opposition. So you didn't speak with anyone from the Treasure Island Police Department in regards?
That's what she said.
What she said.
That's what she told me.
So, she spoke to somebody.
That's what, I just spoke with her. And I also spoke with, another fellow named Mike Smith. Mike Smith is the lighting engineer, for Duke Energy.
And so are they able to officially take a stance?
That's their statement.
Or, are they official position of the police department of Treasure Island?
They were just conveying to me their impressions and information they heard. I did not specifically talk to them.
But in your report, you are specifically saying that Treasure Island Police and Fire Department have made this comment. That is what you're saying in it.
That's what was told to me, yes.
Yes, so with that, I wanted to call them myself to find out, myself. I, spoke with Charlotte Faith Jones, who's a police officer manager. I asked her for specific questions, and she, spoke with Chief Barkley. Then Chief Barkley had gone to the night sergeant who patrols and, who is, the night patrol's boss. And the Marine Resource, I'll just read this, it's very quick. Marine Resource Task Force in Lee County has asked us to provide some insight regarding the turtle lights in the 112th Avenue and Gulf Boulevard area. Near, this request is especially for those who work the night shift in the area of the amber lighting. Barkley has asked me to gather this information for the task force. Has there been any complaints about lighting? Is their lighting bright enough at night? Have any citizens complained about them, etc.? Sergeant Keith M. Reynolds. Has there been any complaints about the lighting? Citizens or your night patrol? None received. Is the lighting bright enough at night? Night patrol. It's a different hue. The area is still adequately lit. Have any citizens complained? No complaints. I'm happy to send this email. This is kind of information, this is the kind of information that I feel like since the start, that you put out these reports and these exercises and we're trying to help you, but you're coming back with inaccuracies and it's not fair. It's not fair to the town of Fort Myers Beach, the taxpayers. It's important that you guys, whatever you take to the town council, whatever recommendation, which is obvious that you're going with this dual lighting as your recommendation, but I ask you to please accurate and thorough. Also, one last thing, and we can move on. But are you aware, have you done research with other coastal towns and the fact that their communities have, where these lights, these 4,000 Kelvin lights have been proven to be nuisance, intrusive for small towns, and now they're having to be changed out. I have a feeling this is gonna be another situation where we put these white lights in, and you're gonna have a lot of people not happy. So, we have Treasure Island, that's one. St. Kitts, actually. We have Brandonton, the lights, the white lights. We have St. Petersburg. And the list goes on and on and on. So I'm asking you, please, come up with some other recommendations besides the dual. Thank you.
Yeah. It appears that you're primarily recommending the dual, but you don't really articulate, or at least maybe I don't understand it. Color of those lights would be. You get amber and white, but I mean like 4,000K versus something. So is the white light going to be 4,000K and the amber light would be
560.
560? So those would be the two different light sources. Okay. Number of poles. Now you say number of luminaries. For example, in the recommendation would be somewhere in the range of 300. Is that 300 poles?
Yes.
What are we currently running out there? 130?
That's actually with mounted luminaires. There's quite a few more poles than there are lights.
Okay, but the ones that currently have lights, about 130, but we could add lights to maybe others if FPL, for example, would accommodate us. So what I'm not really being able to ascertain here is how many poles would we have to add if we went with your recommendation, and what kind of costs would be associated with that? I think it's important, council, to understand, as John was saying, some of these implications, intended or otherwise, of some of that recommendation, the financial impact. Obviously you've laid out what you thought maybe the initial expense would be, and then what maybe an ongoing expense would be, but that initial expense that you're laying out, is that including adding the poles that you're suggesting, or is that just for the fixtures themselves, or?
Lifetime cost or the total cost of everything.
Okay. All right.
Taking the tariffs into account as well?
Recognize the need to update the table in section 8 to more clearly articulate what and when those costs are.
If you're still on the polls, I just want to clarify, because I'm hearing a couple different things here. I read in here that there was 130 polls. I heard Steve say, yes, there's 130 with lights. There are more polls. Do we know the total number of polls? And those that do not currently have lights, would they be able to be used to reduce that 100 that is in the report here that would be additional?
While I'm here, I'm going to get a better estimate of that, but from the audit that we did before and from the GIS maps that we have, adding 100 poles was the conservative estimate of what we would need to add, including the additional poles without lights that we would need to add lights on.
Oh, but you're going to do that. You're going to give us inventory with poles, with lights, poles, and how many additional would be? Okay, just the numbers didn't tie in.
Yeah, one consideration is versus the MPO report is there's another mile on north end. Yeah, it wasn't in there. That originally it was 113 lights they counted for high pressure soda. They were suggesting 200.
Numbers, again, the numbers don't line up.
For the 6 miles. Yeah, but it's reason for question that if that's been done photometrically and everything else, you're suggesting it's going to take 325. Is that correct?
300, it says, number of luminaries.
looking at number of luminaries, no, for the white, just the 4K white light, that would be way up on top. White line design compliant system, yeah, they're suggesting 325, where it took the, that David Green only 200.
I think that was a different design, but at any rate, I think
How
that,
could it be that much different? I mean, that's another mile you have to add, but again, that's another 125 volts,
just
so
the-
it's just, again,
again, it's the discrepancy in
that's,
the 100, the 130, and then the others that are available. So if you could, my only concern is I think Jim's worked that out so we actually calculate a number.
I don't think I did. Jim Nickel with the Public Safety Committee. Thank
Those
you.
are all scattered, that's why I just want.
I know. Thanks, Chelsea. Again, since your recommendation seems to be leaning towards the dual light fixture, and that has not been approved by either FPL or FWC, can you tell me a little bit about that process? What are your expectations? And also how much, I know there's been some discussion about time, but how much time that would add before we would even get started into the project? If we're gonna say, yeah, we like that option and we want to see if they'll approve that. And so you go to them and say, take a look at this option and see if we can get that on the list, both agencies.
Part FWC, more a matter of getting in the queue than the time it takes the test. They're gonna want two things. They're gonna wanna verify that it's narrowband, and they're gonna wanna verify the technology being used to switch the viable technology. Technology is already there. It's the same technology that's turning off the 60 lights. Same calendar method, same technology. As far as the narrowband, they can do that in a matter of minutes. They've got a little scope, they bring it up. So it's queue time for them, how to get in, how to get their time. Right now, they're really, really busy. They're their most busy part of the year. FPL is more the opposite. FPL, it's a matter of going through the environmental tests. FPL does not want to add a fixture that's not going to go for its rated lifetime. It's got to get scheduled for a surge test, 20,000 volt surge, and salt chamber test, as well as a few other mechanical tests and viability of the manufacturer. So the FPL, the salt chamber is the limiting factor. It's a 4-month cycle time. Got to get it scheduled to go in the salt chamber and go through the 4 months. So that's the limiter there.
We'd probably be looking at least 6 months minimum.
Minimum, yes, sir.
And that's if everything went really well. It does in Florida. So, looking at the amber options, a lot of concern, I think, that's been expressed about wildlife and the impact that white light could have on that. So just looking at the amber options, I'm seeing the Cree option and the Visionaire option. Visionaire option has not been approved by FPL, is that correct? As it now?
I don't believe so.
Not on the,
it's not on the
Not-
FPL list.
Not at the FPL list nor on the.
I think
Wait a minute.
DOT is,
I know there's a question about whether or not that this is the BSX correct number, but whichever one you're actually recommending there. It is on the FWC, but not on the FPL, according to your chart.
Correct.
What is the difference between those two lights? How are they gonna look? So, kind of getting back to the question John was saying, but as a human being, what am I gonna see that's different between these two lights? We had one next to each other. Visionaire and the Cree.
The light outputs is from a color standpoint, not much. I think Cree is still a little bit higher in wavelength than the Visionaire. You probably won't notice it that much. And then what's the lumen output? And then the Cree is 1,000?
So,
The Visionary is going to be brighter. The advantage to that is be able to, we have higher pole spacing. This poles can be further apart.
not what it, yeah.
Where the uniform.
Okay,
This is also the one where we need to double check that this is.
the actual correct one.
The BSX is on the F.APL approved wildlife sensitive lighting list, and it's also the standardized product for Lee County DOT.
You're familiar with that light?
Pardon me?
You're familiar with that light?
Yeah, I am, and it's also, been spec'd for the signal projects on the North Island. The 24 hour, that's a 12-month solution. Island. Visionaire BLX2.
LX.
Yeah.
Club Muncie.
SX. And from a public safety perspective, I'm ancient, but I was a policeman for 40 years, so I worked a lot of night shifts. I can assure you there is a difference between amber lighting, white lighting. When an officer arrives at a scene, to be able to ascertain and see better under white light conditions. It isn't really a matter of brightness, it's a matter of perspective, what you, I think, really from a public safety point of view, white light provide a safer environment for drivers and for pedestrians, bicyclists, law enforcement, and as well as firefighters. But firemen they bring their own light. Yes, they do. But when they pull up on the scene, people are laying all over the place. I can just tell you right now, when you walk up and somebody's bleeding under an amber light, he's got black stuff coming out of him. When you walk up under a white light, he's got blood coming out of him. Your brain just sees it different. It just perceives it different because of the reflection of the light. Now, those were probably sodium lights back in the day when I don't know exactly what these LED lights do. I don't know because we haven't really put one out here for us to take a look at. I guess that getting around to this would be the question: Are we going to be able to put up some sample, so that we can feel in touch before the council has to make a final decision on this? Because I think, this is kind of like making a lifelong, like a marriage. It's like a lifelong decision here.
Generational decision.
For the town.
Would you like us to request the manufacturer provide a sample for the city?
We already have, right? That's the 4 samples we've asked for.
Yeah.
So we requested for 4 samples, 1 for FWC, 2 for FPL, and 1 for the city here. That was on our list of things to talk about further on down the line. But, the parking lot here or someplace, we'd work with y'all on someplace to put it up. We'd even work with you on a calendar to set it up, to switch, to turn on, to turn off, so you would have, be able to see the calendar and have some trust in how that works. Yes, sir.
Another indication of how useless this meeting is. I mean, we've already made plans to move forward with it. I mean, it's
If you don't go that way,
it's
no,
indicative.
but we've also made plans with all red and with all right. It would be irresponsible for us not to look how we would proceed. If we don't go with the dual source, that's fine. And if the city doesn't go, hey, there's other places. This is not a force fit.
Any more? I think that's enough.
I'm gonna revert back to the FPL versus the town, but
Identify yourself.
Mike Charles. FPL will not allow foreign lights to go on the poles.
Mhm.
So, obviously, aesthetically, to add, small poles out in front of you said you wanna put everything on the beach side, right?
We pretty much have to.
Yeah, that's it, yeah. So, basically, aesthetically, cost-wise, just not gonna be feasible.
I'm a taxpayer here. I've been here since, island since 1979.
Anything else, Mike?
No.
Anything else? Wendy?
Wendy DiCatano with the Marine Resource Task Force. Instead of being additive, I think Jennifer, really, along with Steve, have covered my major concerns. My biggest concern as a layperson, I'm a retired teacher, I'm not an engineer. I find the report very confusing. I find the discrepancies to be disturbing. And as a teacher, if I was presenting a proposal or information, I would have to make sure that it was accurate. And I find this a bit troubling. It is accurate. I think that our position is the FWC is kind of like the guiding force, because we have to work within their parameters. And biodiversity of our small coastal community, I think, is paramount in the whole scheme of things. Amber lights, we look at Treasure Island. You look at Sanibel that has no lights at the beach. You get Longboat Key. All the different coastal towns are being driven by the FWC and their lighting requirements. I just find this whole issue of white lights versus amber lights, or KISS, keep it simple, sweetheart, I'll say, instead of stupid. The minimal thing is long wavelength, the it low, and shield it. Seems like that's just like the simplest thing. So for me, getting my mind around everything here with discrepancies and misleading and things that are not approved by anybody that are being considered is extraneous. And it, I think it needs to be brought in and controlled and a little bit more user-friendly as far as the information being provided with the.
Rose?
I'd like to clarify something, first of all, about disorientations. The problem with that is that when we use that word, it's already after the fact. When we talk about disorientation, we're talking about a female turtle that's gone up and turned around and not laid her eggs because of a lighting situation. Or we're talking about an entire hatch of turtle eggs, which is probably over 100, which goes the wrong way because of a light disorientation. And then we're going to worry about shielding? I don't think we should put up a system that is going to have all these qualifiers on it. I have done a lot of research. By the way, I didn't identify myself. I think I'm Mary Rose Spalletta from the Marine Resources Task Force. And I have done a lot of research about white light, and I can't really find anything that's very good about it. If you go back 100 years, we didn't have bright lights all nighttime. We have our biology, the biology of our ecosystem has not had time to catch up with bright lights. Now, I know we have developed our island, but we do want to keep some of it natural, and we have a responsibility. We have a stewardship here. We need to meet this responsibility. I think that light management is not a choice between human safety and wildlife survival. I know that there are techniques and products and practices that can ensure everything is beneficial for humans and for wildlife. Light pollution affects all living things, not sea turtles, although they're the ones we have the ordinance for. but it affects everything. Human beings in many, many ways. But in addition, we know that plants rely on the length of night to indicate what season it is, and when they're going to bud and when they're going to flower. We know that birds depend on cues from the seasons in order to decide when to nest and when to forage. We know that artificial lights interfere with that. We know that insects are drawn to light, but artificial lights can produce fatal attractions. We know that people like to fish. If we don't have a good supply of insects, we're not going to have very good fishing around here. We do have a lot of amphibians on this island. We want to keep them. Frogs and toads, they're affected by the glare from lights. Everything on this island, everything that is alive is all interconnected, and we have a responsibility to them. I'd like to ask you, if we put in this dual lighting system, and so we have a luminaire and it has both the amber white and the amber red, in turtle season, which is half of the year, if we don't allow the white light to go on, just the amber ones, will we be able to function on the island at night? Will we be able to drive? Or is it unsafe? I certainly hope it's still going to be that we can function, since it's 6 months out of the year, at least. But if it's fine for then, why isn't it fine for the whole rest of the year? Why do we need to invest in a system? We put in the duals that we are going to have to expend a lot of energy trying to control, waiting until we have disruptions so that we can shield, waiting until there's some or we try and rectify it. Let's not pay to put it in. So that's why I would say that extinguishing lights for the entire nesting season is not a viable option. We should not put in lights that have to be turned off half of the year. I know that there is no substitute for a naturally dark sky. We have to come up with a solution, and we will. The lighting system for Estero Boulevard that includes white lights is simply unwise. White lights would have to be turned off during turtle nesting season. And let's face it, turtle nesting season has been extended because our waters have warmed up. So if we are going to rely on a system that goes by dates, we are going to have disorientations. If we are going to rely on a system that requires shielding, we are going to have bleed through from that shielding, and we will have disorientations. We don't want that. We can avoid it. All we need to do is go with the minimum amount of light required, which will be amber lights. That's what I have to say about the situation. Thanks for listening.
Hi, I'm Rose Larkin. I'm also with the Marine Resource Task Force, and I wasn't sure. Mr. Nichols reported that he was a police officer with amber lighting. You did say that it was sodium-based and probably not LED, so there could be some discrepancy there. And I was curious because the Public Safety Committee back on May 25th was going to check with the Sheriff Department here and the Fire Department on their recommendations and what they felt about it, and now it's 2 months later and we still don't have a written statement.
We talked to them. We did not get a written statement. We said that's what the consultant should provide, that they should have that conversation. So there was an independent conversation, because there was several discrepancies on what we get from studies. We know we've read studies, you've read studies, and they conflict. So our recommendation was they talk to Captain Lawler, Chief Love, and say, on Fort Myers Beach, what are their needs? And so I raised that again this morning, because I haven't seen that report from them.
Can I interrupt? It's on the second page of the outreach form, under Lee County Sheriff's input. It says, the lighting is our law enforcement's friend. The better the light, the better we responders can see. We carry portable light sources, but it's always good to have good lighting. And I'm not sure who actually from Lee County, this is your report?
Report.
And so you spoke to Lee County?
County. I spoke to Lawler and I spoke to.
Okay.
Light color is important for identifying vehicle and clothing color. When we're responding to a report, it helps us know what we're looking for.
What he told us, by the way, face to face in one of our meetings, essentially the same.
Right, Fort Myers Beach is not considered a high crime area. Fort Myers Beach Fire Department input was that, lighting is always a good thing for us. We have to be able to see house numbers or other markers. Operationally, we have no complaints about the current level or color of lighting on Estero Boulevard. That's pressure sodium, half of them turned off for half the year. That's I wouldn't consider that white light. Spectral power distribution are more on the long wavelength side. I mean, it's closer. I mean, actually, put in perspective, amber light is closer to our lighting now than what 4K white light is. You know, I mean, it's far closer than what they're suggesting to put in a 4K. Our concern with lower level lighting is more of an issue with safety. The apparatus does not, they do carry additional scene lighting. But again, I mean, those are the, I would say, high points. The only other thing is that for video footage, it could be helpful.
And again, we've got many reports all over. When I raised it earlier, it was, that has been raised. There's been discrepancies in comments made in public forums, and it should be part of, you know, the report.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
And the only other thing, add to what's been said by other members of the Marine Resource and the problem with white lights and their impact on wildlife is that the American Medical Association actually recommends using lights with the lowest blue light possible for human health. Amber lights have lower blue light.
The other, Dawn Thomas has been on the phone. I've been texting with her. She says most of the concerns have been covered. If she has any, let me know. Next, public comment? As always.
Actually, I just had a couple more questions. Don't mind. One was, again, you said the pricing includes the tariff. You know, Bob Horswood, who's the LED light specialist, he came and presented to the town. And, I mean, he basically is saying that the majority of an amber LED solution would be covered by the tariff. The fact that it's overhead lighting is good. It saves a ton of money. If there's any trenching, that would add in the, you know, the cost in construction. But in general, I'd be surprised, based on you know, the transcript I have from that meeting, that there would be considerably more costs involved that you're suggesting than what he suggests.
I'll go back exactly what I said. If we need to put in line hardened distribution poles, those are very expensive. The fact that we're locked out from the east side of the road.
I'm just suggesting that it seems to be a conflict between his description of what's covered.
The tariff states what's covered, what's not covered, and inline distribution poles are not covered under the tariff.
Okay, I mean,
Yeah.
you're a guy I would trust when it comes up to the
I owned that tariff for 10 years, so.
I think what we need to include on our revision to this report is, I think he's talking about amber replacement of HPS lighting everywhere there's an HPS light, an amber light. And that option is not shown on here, and it looks like we need to add it so that we can.
What about additional lights was asked by a council member, and his, and I quote his response is, the poles and installation come with it. It's sometimes there's an upfront payment required if there's not a pole existing. If you're adding more poles, it's overhead, then I don't think there's an upfront payment required. If you require underground, we would need to charge for trenching and boring unless you want to hire. And then when it was confirmed, Councilman Nanderholt asked, the tariff will cover replacing existing lights with one of these turtle framing lights. If we need additional poles because we're converting to turtle lights, FPL will cover the majority of that in the tariff as well. Is that what you're saying? Response is, if you choose to use these 3 lights or any non-friendly turtle light, that's all covered under the tariff. If you wanted new FPL lights in addition to what you have today, that would be in the tariff as well. We would cover a portion of that. There could be some construction on that. FPL to install poles and have someone else install fixtures on our poles, we do not allow that. Very specific. It seems like it's fairly comprehensive.
Yeah. He's fairly new to this.
Okay, he's sitting.
He's the
working
sitting guy.
correctly. I
I'm
know
just
you're the
telling
old
you.
guy, but I understand that.
The big problem
I'm just
here.
quoting it.
Okay, is,
Being trying to be fair.
yes, sir.
Those aren't my words, those are his words.
Yes, sir. Understood. Question for you. Is the FWC considering extending the turtle season? Did I hear that right?
No, I
2
mean,
years
let it-
ago, we had a turtle who came up early. From May to October, but she came up in the middle of April. So what I'm saying is we can potentially have a
Okay,
need
potentially.
to have our lights
We
out.
can't speak for them, I mean, FWC.
Okay,
but it's-
the way I heard
but
it, I
is-
wanted to make
but it is
sure.
expanding, Joe,
In
yeah.
our brain, that's what we're doing, is we're getting prepared for turtle season early because it's been coming early.
The last question was, is there any empirical data, and I have found nothing at all that suggests that there's a higher incidence of crashes or unsafe conditions in any of these towns that are using amber lighting. There's no empirical data that shows that, proves what you're suggesting. Not that you're suggesting it's safer, but that it's to the point where it's unsafe and it's measurable. No measurable data whatsoever in any of these towns that are using narrowband amber LED lighting. They have a higher incidence of accidents.
Access to some pretty robust crash data.
Please do.
With an answer.
I mean, that would be very defining, I think. I mean, to close, as they, the MRF people talked about, this white light for the island, it results in habitat loss. The number one problem with the environment these days, right? It's a matter of habitat loss. You're making more and more of our country, our world, less suitable for our animal species. The turtle nesting beach, what we're effectively doing, if we do have light pollution and we have sky glow, is we no longer allow, that they will no longer come here and use our habitat to nest. Effectively, that's removing that for the environment as a suitable nesting spot. And it's true for many species, as you know, as they again, we're not environmental zealots either by any stretch of the imagination. This is very upfront and forward, that there's a degradation in our environment, and this post is changed the 10 years I've lived here, and the stories from people who've been here for 30 years, it's outstanding amount of how it's changed into the negative regarding the environment. And so as we move forward, I think that it's imperative for our group, and that's why we are talking so strongly, that we have to conserve our area. It's not about being an environmentalist, it's about being a conservationist. And keeping whatever we have left at any cost, not give it away. And so I'll close my portion with that.
Public comment?
To the mic.
Okay.
It's still limited to 3 minutes, by the way. So.
Please remind me.
Sorry, hi, I'm Cindy.
Start your time.
So I'm a Turtle Time permit holder with several others here. And I would say, I think that's wise not to recommend doing a white system all year long. I spend a lot of time out on the beach. Kind of got hooked into it by our turtle boss, and I spend a lot of time out there. You have so many different variables, like we spoke on the phone, Suzanne. The beach is always moving, and it's expanding to try and shield a light. We still, even with the amber lights, like you said, with the change, you're always seeing different angles of these lights. It's a constant battle to make sure the lights aren't being seen. I could provide a little bit of clarification for John so he can get this off his mind. So the current high
Not
pressure.
much on my mind, Cindy, so it doesn't matter.
I know, but this question keeps coming up to you, and I don't want to go over my 3 minutes, but the high pressure sodium lights that are out there in early 2019, I actually, to make them more turtle friendly, FPL changed them all over to flatheads, right, Chelsea? And I don't know when. No, the high pressure sodium's along Estero Boulevard. Irma?
really, yeah. And so I worked on all of those, and as their point is, if anything goes wrong, PL will come change a light, and sometimes they'll put a drop-down back in. So we have several of those. But I don't really think the statement made by the original engineer was, you know, you're trying to take something more from it. Like these lights are seen from the beach. It wasn't like you can correct those 22 lights and that would solve the problem of the current lighting system, okay, for the disorientations.
Yeah.
Okay, so you don't have to talk about that anymore. I guess that's my 3 minutes. I'll have someone
Got another
else's thing.
minute.
Okay.
You don't have to use this, Cindy.
So, anyone on public safety? Guys want to go out on the beach? I don't know if that will help you out. I'm leaving Thursday, so it'd have to be before then or after. And the lights, how the lights affect the sea turtles is not always an easy thing to understand, and it's not an easy thing to control. And it's a constant effort by Dad to try and get this big job done. So we want a solution that isn't going to add more work or confusion to people to think, or confusing people to think that amber light is unsafe. You don't want people to think that, and you know that it's not. You know that you can provide a very good amber lighting system. So to switch off, I mean, ideally, like Joe was saying, oh, some of our shops have bright lights, and you know, we should probably work with them. Ideally, we should become a dark skies community for our environment and help everyone understand how to light correctly, how to not put up lights, you know, bright white lights or any light on your property that is affecting glare and everything else. So,
Thank you.
and we didn't even talk about dark skies, so you know that dark skies lumen number keeps going down. So 4,000 wouldn't be a dark skies number anymore.
Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you.
All right. What I heard, one of the things that I heard that's common amongst everybody here is that there are conflicts in the report. There seems to be some discrepancies. Some clarification in the report needs to be made before it gets to council. There are so many reports that have floated around from so many sources that you need to kind of knock out some of those discrepancies or identify them and make sure they're clear for the council. As far as the Public Safety Committee, I'll summarize the comments that were made today by us. I'll get those into a draft to Chelsea and get that out to you for comment and for our report that goes to council on August 3rd. Chelsea, do you have anything you want to say? Chad, anything you want to add? All right, Steve?
Unless you have any questions.
Any more comments before we? You guys got anything last on your list?
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn?
Mayor want to say something?
He can't.
He's not allowed to.
Well, he can, but he can't really voice his he can't, he's gonna be voting on it. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. We're out of here, thanks. Thank you.
Want a postcard?